The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Article 27, Volume 12, 1878, and 1879. To Correspondents. The Invercargill Circular of April 1878. 1878, 142. The recent New Zealand circular has appeared in this country and indicates such an advance in the writer's soul that, if strengthened in faith to walk consistently with its avowed principles, he cannot abide in the ranks of neutrality, but must seek his place with those branded as exclusives. He owns that he wrote erroneously in his former tract, entitled Discipline and Position, etc., on the question of wicked association, which is the hinge on which the controversy turns. He dwells on the incompatibility of fellowship with evil and Christ, as in 1 Corinthians 8-10, and the still deeper sin of countenancing those who bring not the doctrine of Christ, as in 2 John. But he is, in my judgment, mistaken in grounding the answer of God to this solemn question on the omission of his say in Matthew 18. As read by Tischendorf in the 8th edition of his New Testament, following such slender evidence as the Sinai and Vatican manuscripts, two cursives, and fathers who cites loosely and insert as well as omit. The mass of the uncials and cursives, and every ancient version known, save one, as far as I can speak, add the words, as Tischendorf did in his valuable 7th edition, and almost all editors, save Lachman, including one so extreme as the late Dr. Tregelles, disposed as he was to the narrow line of a very few witnesses of extreme antiquity. Dean Alford even suggested hierarchical reasons as the motive for the omission, in order to enlarge the Church's discipline, but this seems questionable, especially as the Latins, ready enough for practice of that kind, give unanimous testimony to what limits the scope to individual trespass. But surely the writer will see on reflection, that if we disown rightly, as he allows, an assembly which receives or retains those whose walk or doctrine denies their profession of Christ, it is a plain duty to refuse everyone who intelligently upholds or winks at that wicked association. Satan would be pleased indeed at high-sounding abstract condemnation in word, coupled with allowance of the evil, by thoroughly responsible souls who help it on. He does not appreciate the difference between the mere religious systems which never took the stand of owning the Spirit's presence to carry out the Lord's will in their midst, and those who owe their eyes to the determination of combining holy claims with unholy associations. We have always made allowance for the ill-taught Christians in systems as unintelligently but honestly framed as themselves, and for dealing in grace with ignorance, was express provision made in the abused Bethesda circular. But it was soon discovered that many pleaded ignorance who knew far too much for their integrity or the Lord's honor, and this did lead to caution in wise men, as it engendered suspiciousness in weak men. But it would be folly to place the companies of those who gather to the Lord's name, however loose, neutral, open, or whatever they may be called, on the same ground as the ordinary denominations. It would be their deep dishonor if it could be done righteously, and they really wished it themselves, for it is to avoid the consequences of unfaithfulness in favor of their friends, the essence of party work and worse. One can only pray that the writer may see this for his own clearance, therefore, and not let holding the principle of believers' fellowship as he calls it, swamp the maintenance of practical holiness in the assembly, the Lord's name being bound up with it. The open meetings cannot enjoy the allowance made for ignorance which one accords to a sect, together with the privileges and responsibility of an assembly met in the Lord's name, and recognizing the one body and one Spirit. If they were denominations, like a Wesleyan society, the English establishment, or the like, one might receive godly individuals at such, without question, but not so since they have assumed the place of owning the Lord's presence and the free action of the Holy Ghost, which makes every intelligent person among them solemnly responsible after another sort. For honest ignorance, we should still make allowance wherever it exists. Now it is for intelligent but willful partisans that the plea is usually set up, is this really defensible? Is it loyalty to Christ? What is more deplorable than this thick and thin support of friends in the things of God? It is of esteem among men, but an abomination in his sight. The writer acknowledges also that the evil is immensely aggravated by full testimony and patient admonition. Any evil might enter any assembly, But it is the want of genuine zeal in judging it scripturally for Christ's sake, which is so fatal that no assembly ought to be owned if it distinctly abandon this paramount duty. The deliberate acceptance of evil, the persistent failure to clear itself, ought to unchurch, and those who, with conscience before God, leave such a defiled meeting, are the very inverse of schismatics if they also hold fast to the one body. Nor is it a sort of clergy, that is, men here or there, who set up to an exclusive right to judge these questions, who have to decide this, nor other meetings in the neighborhood, but saints in the circumstances who have to act for God in their own duty, with the interests of Christ and the Church in their hearts. There are other points, and not without moment, in the circular needless to notice. Only let the writer beware of being influenced by the imaginary difficulties of ad infinitum contact with the evil, which speculative minds urge to destroy conscientious action. No sober mind but rejects a theoretical association extending through endless ecclesiastical receptions and ramifications. If he believes we are right in refusing a sound man who cleaves to and justifies an unsound or wicked association, he surrenders the principle of open brethren, and is bound to act accordingly. The more devoted the saints may be individually, the worse is their sanction of what is unholy. The writer endorses this himself, which is really the principle and defines the position of the so-called exclusive brethren,